Now, you all will be wondering, suddenly you see a new person coming in as your MC. So, what exactly happened was our MC was bombarded by the quantum particle and he was pushed into unconscious state. Okay, so he kind of trying to get into a sleeping state. So, I was, woken up from my sleeping state to keep you all conscious and myself also. Okay, so let me try to do that. I'll try my level best to do that. Now, we have a wonderful session, and the session chair is from a very interesting background. He is Sri Priyabrata Pramanik. He is from IRS. He is an IRS. He is working in the income tax department, presently working in intelligence and criminal investigation wing, in charge of West Bengal, Sikkim, and Andaman and Nicobar Island. He has done research on tax gap analysis and black money generation, dangerous. For this, he used a hitherto unused in revenue department technique called micro simulation. That is, tax gap in particular areas were visible that resulted in revenue augmentation through suitable administrative measures. So I was asking how he got interested in quantum physics. He says the laws of physics has been used in econometry in arriving at the distribution of X gap and generation of B money, black money. Okay. So the research was hailed as a pioneering work for the first time by the Revenue Department in India and hailed by the experts of World Bank, OECD, tax advisors of Canada and New Zealand, and UK and France by economics like Professor Sugata Marjit as the departmental expert. May I invite our chairperson, Mr. Priyabrata Pramanik, onto the stage, sir, please. So this session is going to be on what is consciousness. Sir, I hand over the mic to you. Sir.
Invite the speakers. In the field of consciousness, we have two eminent speakers today, Professor Bijoy H. Borua and our own President of Bhakti Vedanta Institute, K. Vasudeva Rao. I invite both the speakers kindly on the stage. Professor Borua, who is a senior faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Department of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. He has done his BA in Philosophy, MA in Philosophy from BHU, MLit in Philosophy from University of Oxford, and PhD from University of Guelph, Canada. Very interesting and quite topical. His areas of specialization include philosophy of mind, philosophical aesthetics, history of modern Western philosophy, ethics, and value theory. If you look at the contemporary politics of India, every day things are thrown in parliament as to who is black and who is white, particularly after post-demonetization. So, this is a very logical thing and quite contemporary thing that we will be hearing from Professor Borua on his specialized subject, a structured division in the metaphysics of consciousness. And he has also given 10 doctoral students, out of which 9 were supervised at IIT Kanpur. Presently, he is with IIT Delhi, and several international and national journal articles in the field of philosophy and literature has been published by him. So, please be ready for a very, very interesting session. Thank you.
So this is going to be quite different from the preceding discussions, because I'm quite naive about science. I just wonder if I had known physics and mathematics pretty well, how I would have put this paper in another form. But anyway, this is more about subject and object, and these two concepts were introduced in the morning by Professor Amit Goswami in his own way. That was very illuminating. I'm continuing that, but perhaps there is more discontinuity than continuity after a while. Now, this distinction between the subject and the object is, in a way, a grammatical distinction. You have, in a sentence, a subject expression and an object expression. If I say, she hit him, she is the subject, hit is the verb, and him is the object. So I'm following that, and of course, from grammar, I want to reach metaphysics, and hopefully this will shed some light on the nature of consciousness, at least human consciousness, if not consciousness as such. I start with a quotation which is from Wittgenstein, a philosopher of the 20th century. Those of you who don't know about Wittgenstein, there's just half a minute's description. He was an aeronautical engineer, and then he became interested in philosophy. He wrote something very briefly, sent it to Bertrand Russell, who was at Cambridge at the time as professor of philosophy, with the question, if Russell were to find his writing interesting, good enough, then he would quit engineering and take up philosophy. And Russell did like it, and the rest is history. He just became not just a philosopher, but presumably the best of the philosophers of the 20th century. So he writes, if I wrote a book called The World as I Found It, imagine this to be a global book project, I should have to include a report on my body and should have to say which parts were subordinate to my will and which were not. This being a method of isolating a subject, or rather showing that in an important sense, there is no subject. In an important sense, there is no subject. For it alone could not be mentioned in that book. Doesn't work. That doesn't work. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Now, this is, of course, an imaginary book, which is a book of recording everything that Wittgenstein finds in the world. Just imagine that he wants to write a book in which he would mention everything that he finds in the world, including his own body, of course, which he definitely would find in the world, except himself. Now, himself, I have italicized half of the word, that portion, self, and there is an intention of doing it, because that is something which he can't find in the world. He can't find himself, even though he can find his own body. And that self is, of course, the subject that he is, the I that everyone uses to refer to oneself, which alone could not be mentioned. If something could not be mentioned, it means the alleged something could not be found in the world, because you mention whatever you find. That's a trivial truth. Now, it can't be the case that Wittgenstein fails to find himself in the world. It can't be the case that Wittgenstein fails to find himself in the world. You find yourself before, or at least as soon as you find anything else. What I'm saying is that before you find anything else, you find yourself. That's again another trivial truth. Therefore, it is surprising to say that he couldn't find himself, or he can't find himself in the world. In that case, Wittgenstein is distinguishing himself into two Wittgensteins. One is Wittgenstein the subject, and the other is Wittgenstein the object. So himself, in the sense of referring to his own body, would be Wittgenstein the object. Wittgenstein the object, let's give him a name, Wittgenstein. It's a spatio-temporal particular in the world satisfying standard criteria of identity and individuation. It would therefore be part of the findings of Wittgenstein's Global Book Project. It will figure in the Global Book Project. If Wittgenstein the subject, on the other hand, and let's give him a name, Wittgenstein, as opposed to Wittgenstein, is distinct from Wittgenstein, that is, Wittgenstein is the object, Wittgenstein is Wittgenstein the subject, in virtue of being a subject, then what exactly is the nature or property of being a subject, which accounts for the non-identity between Wittgenstein and Wittgenstein? If we talk about a grammatical subject, it always stands in a certain syntactically rule-governed or rule-constrained relation with an object phrase, mediated by a verb phrase like she hit him, in a syntactically well-formed sentence. Constraints of syntax make this relation asymmetrical with a subject-to-object direction of fit. That is to say, if Mary hits him, then the relation between the subject and the object is obviously asymmetrical, because the object cannot become the subject in place of the original subject. So it's the subject-to-object direction of fit, and this direction of fit, of course, is asymmetrical. This is rule of grammar. In Mary loves the cat, just imagine a sentence. The subject, Mary, takes the position of an agent geared to performing the act, namely the act of kissing on the object, which is the cat. If Mary's love of cat is expressed in the form of kissing the cat, that the subject is grammatically agentive with regard to the object of this sentence. And the object is something over which agentive function is accomplished. This act-object analysis fixes the direction of fit from the subject to the object. Now, please don't think I'm doing an elementary school grammar class. This is just building up to something quite different. What if the sentence is Mary loves herself? Grammatically speaking, there is no difference in this sentence from the former sentence, because the grammatical form is the same subject-object form for both, and they both admit of the same act-object structural analysis. Here, Mary, the grammatical subject, performs the agentive function of loving over the grammatical object, namely herself. Psychologically, is there a problem here? I mean, is there a problem about Mary loving herself? Well, certainly no problem, because self-love is a very common psychological reality. We do love ourselves. Maybe there is a little bit of problem here, that of psychological self-split, splitting oneself into two. Now, if Mary loves herself, there is some sort of split between Mary the lover and Mary the beloved, the loved one. I mean, not psychological self-split in any abnormal sense. Oneself being both the lover and the loved. But this isn't a big problem, because human psychology, or at least human neurophysiology, is sophisticated enough to enable the human person to be at once the loving subject and the loved object. Thus, the grammatical act-object analysis has also its psychological structural counterpart. Mary adopts the psychological attitude of loving towards herself, the object of Mary's loving attitude. Of course, there aren't two Marys. There is just one Mary in the two psychological roles. The role of being the subject, agentive subject, and the role of being the object who is loved. Two psychological roles, as it were, which are those of the lover subject or agent and the loved object or recipient. But, and now I'm building up the whole thing in such a way that it should look a little messy henceforth. Things are beginning to look messy. Mary loves herself, fine. If this third person sentence is converted into a first person utterance by Mary herself, then it becomes, I love myself. I mean, that is the first person version of Mary loves herself. If Mary were to say to herself, well, I love myself. Now, the psychological nexus of loving would be construed as occurring between, now this is where everything is central, occurring between I and myself. So, I love myself is a relation between I and myself. Psychology involves, or could involve, philosophy. Well, I say this because from now on, this psychological point takes a philosophical turn. Psychological relations are ontological. Ontological means existential. It's about the being or existence of something. Psychological relations are ontological insofar as relations such as loving entail psychological beings as relata. In the example above, the relata are I and myself. In other words, if there is a psychological relation between I and myself, then for this relation to be possible, both I and myself must exist, because relation can occur only if they exist. Both the relata must exist here for the relation to be possible. So the fact of being I and the fact of being myself are beyond any doubt. They both are existentially facts. Complication increases. Ontology, the question of being, begins to act funny here. Are being I and being myself one and the same fact of being? Same ontological fact? I'm raising a question here. In a sense, yes. They are identical. Just one being, Mary. No more than Mary herself. as we say I myself, meaning thereby just me, which announces self-identity. In another more important sense, and I think a highly philosophical sense, they are not one and the same being. I'm denying now what I just asserted earlier. There is an existential point of view, an existential perspective from which their ontological non-identity is evident. That is, the non-identity between I and myself, I and me. The being of myself or the being of me is a dependent one. This is where the argument for their non-identity begins. The me exists so long as and only because there exists the I, for whom and only for whom something is me. The me draws all its ontological sustenance from the being of the I. Now, this is not mysterious. Just think of yourself. Everyone says, it's me. But that me doesn't exist unless it's viewed by the I. Just think, it's very simple, nothing mysterious, which means your me has no independent existence. It exists only when it is viewed by the I, only when it is inspected by the I, only when it is within the purview of the I, the subject self. And since me is dependent, if I is not dependent, I is independent, obviously I and me cannot be identical. How can the dependent and the independent be identical in the strict sense of, strict mathematical, logical sense of identity? The me comes into being and sustains itself in its being precisely when it is viewed by the I. It is only in the eye of the I that the me becomes a psychological reality, a self-image. Again, think of me as self-image. Whose self-image is it? The me? It's always I's self-image. That's what I mean by the me exists only in the eye of the I of the I. Detached from the purview of the I, the me turns into nothingness. If you don't bring the me under the purview of the I, there is no me. As simple as that. Interpreting me in terms of self-image is understanding it as an appearance of oneself, in oneself. Now, another notion I'm introducing, appearance. The me is an appearance. It appears to the I. And of course, it appears in oneself. But this again is ontology acting funny. I mean, ontology becoming complicated, at least looking funny. Oneself appearing to oneself? There seems to be a logical muddle here. Is this logically possible? It doesn't seem possible unless oneself on the left-hand side non-trivially differs from oneself on the right-hand side. That is, oneself appearing to oneself, the left oneself and the right oneself, right-hand side oneself, they must importantly differ. Then and only then it would be a meaningful statement. Oneself appearing to oneself would be meaningful. Otherwise, it would be absurd. Of course, what I'm saying is that the self or image of the self that appears to the me, and it appears not to me but to the I. The me is an appearance, an image, which entails that there must be a who that it is an appearance too, which is the I. I'm just clarifying the same point. Any appearance is, of course, experienced by the subject for whom it is an appearance. Appearance is therefore a matter of awareness. Now, I'm introducing another concept, awareness, and the difference between, and also the relation between the two, between awareness and appearance. An appearance is, by definition, something of which you have to be aware. And therefore, the point of view from which you have the awareness is different from what you are aware of, namely the appearance. So the me is the appearance, the I is the awareness of that appearance. Again, any appearance sustains in its being so long as, and only as long as, the awareness of it lasts. Appearances don't survive without awareness. Appearances turn into nothingness once the awareness, which is aware of the appearance, goes away. Since me is an appearance that I am aware of, and I do not, indeed I cannot, appear to the me, from I to me, but not the other way around. That's the asymmetry of the relation between awareness and appearance. It follows that the I represents the awareness within which the me is an appearance. In fact, what I'm aware of when I am self-aware is me. Self-awareness is never I-awareness, but always and necessarily me-awareness. I think that this point should be quite clear if you have followed the argument that I have tried methodically to develop so far. Another bit of funny ontology here. I mean, ontology is still continuing to be funny. What am I? What is me? I mean, I'm talking about I and me, but what am I and what is me? Since I'm talking about the non-identity between the two, these two questions, interrogations, must occur separately. These two self-interrogative statements invite ontological analysis and clarification. Are these two statements questioning the same thing about my being? Again, raising a question. Suppose we try to answer these questions by saying, quote, I am ... And if you try to answer, what am I? By saying, I am ... blah, blah, blah. What shall we fill up the blanks with? Well, we would fill up the blank by describing who I am, say Bijoy Barua, what I do, teach in IIT Delhi, how I think, well, philosophically, in a literary way, narrative way, how I think and feel, where I live, when I was born, and so on. These descriptions would constitute my being the person that I am, my being the me that I am. So all these answers would describe the me, not the I. But then what happens to the I? Here, the me that I am means that I am the person that I recognize as me. I am the person that I recognize as me. That the person that you recognize in yourself is the me, with regard to yourself, of course. That is, being me is just being the owner or appropriator of the set of personal properties just enumerated in the previous paragraph. So all these things that I narrated, described about who I am, they are really owned and appropriated by the me. Thus, the answer to what am I is simply, I am me. This funny ontology continues, though. I am me would readily strike us as asserting identity between I and me. But this is an ontological deception. Normally we say, well, it's me. That means I am me. We make this as a kind of identity statement. But I am claiming, given this analysis, that this is ontological deception. The I, being a subject, cannot be identical with the me. The I is not identical with the me, which is an object. The subject cannot be identical with the object. The me object has no reality independently of its being viewed by the I, whose subjective gaze is entirely responsible for being me. Does this mean that the I can sustain itself in its being without having the life of me whatsoever? Well, this is the big question, the million-dollar question. I have shown, I hope quite convincingly, that the me is totally dependent. It can't exist on its own, sustain itself on its own. But what about the I? Can it sustain itself on its own, independently? Well, in principle, I can. I say in principle because one should always make a guarded remark. Of course, the I is a subject of so many predicates or properties which make up its inflated me. It is also true for mortal humanity that the I tends to identify itself with the me. Well, I said our mortal nature is such that, of course, I would identify myself with me. Who else? And this identification is very important. Indeed, that's the whole point of I's calling itself me or myself in an unassuming mood of appropriation of predicates. The subject self generally tends wholeheartedly to feel oneness with the object self. Generally, the structured duality of subject and object goes entirely unrecognized in the stream of life. Now, this duality, which I have tried carefully to bring to light, it goes completely unrecognized in the stream of life, in the engaged stream of life, ordinary life. However, awareness of the structured duality need not just be a philosophical circumstance. I'll skip this for this, because I may not have enough time. If the I is in principle independent of the me identity, then it has no identity of its own. Me has an identity. Just me is the person that I am, with a name, profession, bodily size, location, etc. But unlike that, the I has no identity of its own and no criteria of individuation. Perhaps it is for this reason that Wittgenstein was unable to mention this subject self in the book, in the global book project. The reason why Wittgenstein said, I can find everything else except myself in that book. This must be the reason. He can certainly find Wittgenstein as object in the world, because Wittgenstein is an object self with the spatio-temporal identity of a person. But Wittgenstein, the subject, or the I, is a subject self, the irreducible and independent I, who never becomes part of the world because it never appropriates anything worldly. As Wittgenstein says, beautiful quotation here, the subject does not belong to the world. Rather, it is a limit of the world. Now, I can't go into an interpretation of this for lack of time. If I had, I would have. Now, my last page, which is, by the way, a one-page short story from literature by George Louis Borges. Many people might know he was a very famous 20th century Argentine literary figure, excellent literary figure. This is just one-page short story, Borges and I. I'm not going to read all of it, only the highlighted portion. It's Borges, the other one, that things happen to, the very first sentence. What's going on here? Borges, the writer, the literary figure, he's saying it's Borges, the other one, that things happen to. Who is saying this? Borges is saying this about himself. But then, thank you, then Borges is addressing himself as the other, calling Borges the other, not oneself. Okay. This I take to be the distinction between I and me. The I Borges is saying, well, the Borges who writes everything, becomes famous, has an identity, is the me Borges. Okay? And the me is the other. So oneself as another. That's the whole idea of this story. News of Borges, just the highlighted portion. News of Borges reaches me by mail, email or whatever, or post-mail. Or I see his name on a list of academies, or in some biographical dictionary. So Borges is, as it were, he comes to know the Borges himself through mails, through biographical dictionary, etc. In the second paragraph, he writes, I allow myself to live so that Borges can spin out his literature. And that literature is my justification. Now here you can see the I is prominent. I allow myself to live. Who lives? Not the I, but Borges. I mean, when I create something, of course, he writes, that writing is appropriated by who? Not by the I, but by the me of Borges. So it's like I'm doing lots of things. I create this, I create that, but nothing that I create, I possess, or I appropriate, or I own. I give it away. Okay? So I make myself perpetually the other. That means the me that continuously, perpetually is generated by my life, by what I do, that me is perpetually separated from the I. And the me becomes the appropriator, independent owner, the I. Nothing is appropriated by it. It's completely detached, completely without any identity, as it were. Little by little, I have been turning everything over to him, though I know the perverse way he has of distorting and magnifying everything. Little by little means whatever, little by little, every day I create, I do. I don't keep it to myself. I turn them over to him. Him, of course, means the me. Borges, the me. Though I know the perverse way he has of distorting and magnifying everything. Who distorts and magnifies everything? The me. The me would say, the me Borges would say, oh, I'm so great. People are praising me. My books are being sold. I'm getting lots of royalty. And these are perverse way of distorting and magnifying everything about Borges or about that me, which all of us do all the time. Now, I shall endure in Borges, not in myself. That means the I Borges is saying, if anything is to have endurance, of course, it would have to have identity. The I of Borges doesn't endure. What endures is the Borges, the me Borges. I shall endure in Borges, not in myself. Now, the next highlighted phrase is very beautiful and very thought-provoking. Years ago, I tried to free myself from him. Think of I and me, the struggle that goes on within oneself, if one is being self-critical. Okay? Imagine your I is trying to free itself from your me, what kind of an inner struggle would that be? Okay? That means, usually we know that the I is immediately identifying itself with the me. And there's self-love. But suppose by some self-critical stance, you're creating the separation and then desperately trying to separate the I from the me, from that desire for identity. So Borges is also saying, years ago, I tried to free myself from him. So those desperate attempts must have been made by Borges. And I moved on from the mythologies of the slums and outskirts of the city to games with time and infinity. Now here, reference to the slums and outskirts of the city would be to, I think, Buenos Aires, the capital city of Argentina, where he probably grew up. He was composing his stories on the basis of the slums and outskirts of the city when he was composing his literature. And of course, in South American literature, mythology plays a very great role, as many other forms of literature. I moved on from the mythologies of the slums and outskirts of the city to games with time and infinity. Now, of course, a literary thinker would do many things, just as mythologically resorting to slums and outskirts to compose the stories. And then if that data bank sort of runs out of its steam, then another literary data bank would be tried upon. And this new data bank could be something like games with time and infinity. Maybe his stories have taken a turn towards more reflection about time and infinity. In fact, if you read his short stories, you will find a lot of those experiments with time and infinity. So these are the literary experiments that they conduct. But those games belong to Borges now, and I shall have to think up other things. That means maybe he was trying different ways to keep the separation between the I and the me as objectively as possible by playing out different games, different experiments. This reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi's My Experiment with Truth. Mahatma Gandhi must have done the same thing in experimenting with his own life, which he called an experiment with truth, separating the I from the me. That tremendous seductive desire to identify the two. I shall have to think up other things. That means all these experiments did not suffice to maintain the separation. I have to now think of new experiments. And this goes on. I'm coming to the end. Everything winds up being lost to me from the I to the me. And everything falls into oblivion. The I has no memory, because in order to have memory, you have to have some content. But the I is empty. Everything is given away to the me, lost to me. And everything falls into oblivion or into the hands of the other man, the me. Now, the last sentence is a masterstroke in literature. He's saying, I'm not sure which of us it is that's writing this page. Having written this page, now he's questioning, did I write or did me write this? And he lives this story right here. Now, I think this is the uncertainty that we all have. We don't reflect about it philosophically, but I think we all have, even for a moment. And the separation between I and me, I think, is the finest spiritual experiment you can have. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Professor Borua has enlightened us with a kind of self-introspection, with the differentiation between I and me, subject and object, in his structured division in the metaphysics of consciousness. And I would like to invite your questions for him to answer on this topic. Very, very interesting topic, I must say. Particularly, we know about interrogation, but what about this self-interrogation that he has spoken about? Well, I have a question.
No, there's a question. The machine is not working.
Yeah.
Maybe the other one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please.
Professor Borwa, this is simply wonderful, masterful analysis that you did, and that quote from Borges, of course, I greatly admire. This is also the fundamental question of Buddhism, that when we get to all of this, the eyes seem to be empty. But I think the Borges misses, and I just want your opinion on this. I think Buddhism also misses this point. The eye, that it can be distinguished. The me is always me of the known, and the I is the me of the there's no me, you're right. The I who creates, you cannot distinguish, because that's creation. In the creativity theory, we call it a flow between the me and the I. In the quantum theory, you can distinguish between I that creates, through which intuition comes and the insight comes, and the me that gives it form. So in that flow between the I and me, I cannot really tell who writes. And that's so beautiful. But what I'm getting at, though, that both Buddhism and Borges misses the point that there is a distinction. The creative I, there is always a continuous creation of the me, and the I is beyond that, the creative I. So quantum physics allows us to understand this. What is your opinion of that?
From what you said, okay. I mean, in the beginning, I said, had I known physics and mathematics very well, perhaps I would have written in a very different way than what I wrote. For example, you were talking about the quantum self. You were talking about archetypes earlier, and the possibility of creating archetypes was a capacity of the quantum self. Now, that kind of idiom, because of not having that conceptual mastery, I can't take the courage, or I don't have the ability to put it that way. Now, whatever else you said now, in terms of the creative I and the me which is created, I don't see any difference from that, difference in what you said from what I said, because even though there is a kind of dialectical relation between the I and the me, it is a continuous, perpetual dialectic, because most of the time we tend to give in to the me. The creative I tends to give in to the me, and it does give in. There is a seductive urge, and only seldom perhaps we succeed. And it is those few moments of success that I'm trying to project in terms of the creative I, in terms of making it independent from the dependent I. Of course, it loses its independence. In Borges' story, in fact, that's this sad confession that no matter whether he is playing new games with even time and infinity, he doesn't succeed. He falls prey to this seductive urge. And finally, in that masterstroke sentence, when he said, which of the two, which of us is writing these sentences, that confusion shows our utter mortality, that we are really a kind of spiritual failure. Okay? But the good point is that it introduces us to what exactly is the experiment of spirituality.
I would like to ask one question. Like in our Vedantic traditions, I itself is an appearance. And how far in Western psychology or philosophy they have come closer to this realization that it is not that all that makes up the me, making a complex around the I, that is an appearance, and beyond that, how far Western psychology and philosophy in the 20th century has come closer to realizing the fact that the I itself, the core I in each one of us, is itself an appearance which comes out of ignorance, as the as Vedanta tells us.
Okay, whatever I said doesn't come from any particular tradition, whether Western or Eastern. I know what you were saying about our tradition, the Vedantic tradition, the Jivatman, which is in bondage and all that. And of course, it is the Jiva Atma, the Jiva rather than the Atman, which is in ignorance and which is an appearance. I was not alluding to any of those things. In fact, I tried to do something which is totally independent of any particular tradition. That's why I started with grammar, as minimalistically as possible, starting with a syntactical difference, and then slowly built it up as a kind of conceptual analysis to come to ontology, to show that psychological split without any reference to any ism. Now that's the part of the historical point that you're making. Now, the I, if it is the creative I, the agentive I, obviously it can't be an appearance because whatever as an agent it creates, the created becomes an object, and only an object can be an appearance. The subject by definition cannot become an appearance.
Yes.
Yeah, Professor Baru, here, Professor Baru, yeah. So
Okay.
it is very interesting. I mean, the way we are exploring into our inner self and trying to find the self. It appears that there is one assumption that whenever we are finding some kind of quality which can be described in the spatio-temporal way, any kind of quality, we are putting that into the me, and
Yes.
and basically the I is basically therefore something which we are not able to give any quality, because as soon as I put a quality there, I'm immediately pushing it out in the me.
Yes.
So now there is a very relevant question actually, that then whether fundamentally can you define I as something where we cannot give any attribute.
Yes.
So it leads to that conclusion. But there can be another way of looking at the whole thing, because see, this me is different appearance, they are changing. And there are a lot of possibilities which we have not even encountered. We don't know them. So this I can also lie in a domain of qualities which we have not yet encountered. One possibility is we put it as attributeless, and another possibility could be that there is some kind of special attribute which can be also given. So any comment on that, these two distinctions?
If you would like an attributed rather than attributeless I,
Yeah.
it would be more. I feel like saying that it would be more in the neti style.
Yeah,
Because-
let's say attributeless.
Yeah, because whatever you do,
Yeah.
it's out there, as it were. Once you have done, it's already manifested out there. Then it assumes a form, and that's what the me is.
Yeah.
Okay, the creating I doesn't assume a form. It is like a water flow, constantly
Yeah, that-
flowing out.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm trying to make, that may be because of our, the whole previous experience of the attributes we know. But again, there can be a different kind of attribute, which we are not totally, I mean, we have never experienced that. I mean, just like I am saying that this is not Calcutta, this is not Calcutta. And that doesn't mean, I mean, suppose I land up in Kanpur. But that is Kanpur, that's different. So not being Calcutta does not imply that it's attributeless. It can be Delhi or Kanpur. That's the point I mean, have you any or any kind of philosopher who has also taken into consideration this kind of?
I don't know that much, but this idea of pure consciousness that we have in our tradition, or maybe in other traditions as well, what's that purity?
Yeah.
If you think, it has to be attributelessness. Okay? So even if you go by the classical Indian tradition, the notion of a pure consciousness, I as pure consciousness, that's precisely what you are getting, the predicateless, attributeless self.
Yeah.
And that's the view and if you want to call purity itself an attribute, no problem. But that's
No, that I am not calling actually.
Yes,
but
yes.
but what I am just trying to ask is that within, this is totally within the empirical, frame of work, and that
okay.
that's the point I am trying to hit at. I mean, you go beyond empiricism, then there could be, I mean, that.
Okay, fine. Now I think it is making more sense. What you are saying is that there is an empirical ego. Let's say at the empirical level,
Yes.
the I is functioning. The empirical I.
Yeah.
Okay. In the mundane world.
Yeah.
Now, is that creative I without any attribute? This is your question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, again, I would say, even if it is the empirical I, I think the principle is the same, because by virtue of what is the I functioning? By virtue of the power of consciousness. Okay? It is because of the power of consciousness, however you put that power, that I am able to create something, do something. Okay? So the I represents only that power of consciousness.
Right.
I can't see anything more than that.
Yeah. Now, it is very interesting that by the empirical way, we're coming to something like, which is also one school of Vedanta, I will say. There are
Well, the interesting question would be whether the empirical I, the consciousness that the empirical I is making use of, is itself empirical consciousness.
Yes.
Because probably consciousness has nothing like empiricality or non-empiricality. Consciousness is consciousness.
Right.
It's where you connect consciousness to. Empiricality becomes a kind of property of consciousness's connection to the context. So empiricality relates the context, but consciousness is, I think, context-free, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Hello, Professor.
Okay, have you time or?
No, you carry on, please.
Okay, Professor Barua, of course, one practical experience I am talking. A few days back I met a person. I was in the distant corner, let us say that, and he was sitting here. So whatever I was thinking, whatever writing, he was telling here from a long distance. Yes, he is writing as such and is thinking as such, and which was absolutely true. Because I am a policeman, I am not a practical experience, that's why I am asking. In which aspects of this Wittgenstein or quantum aspects, how can it be connected the self, I, or the I with me? That was one I was myself there with me, whatever with my past and others. Here also that person also was another I with himself. So how can you correlate with this issue? Thank you. Sorry, I'm taking time.
I'm afraid I did not understand the question. I'm afraid.
Just thought reading. Many persons, they read the thoughts also of another person. So how can you correlate this, whatever you are explaining in this Wittgensteinian theory?
You mean to say, if I adopt your thoughts, what happens to this I? Is that the question?
You're exactly predicting. Whatever I'm thinking right now, there also you are thinking, yes, I am thinking that. Not telepathy, thought reading directly.
Oh, if I can read your thoughts.
I can, it's happened. It's not I can.
Then what's the question? If I can read your thoughts,
Exactly.
what's the question?
In which way it relates?
Relates
in which
to
way relates this I and me?
Well, I think the question is not too clear for me. All I would say that whatever I think, the product of my thought is part of me. That is to say, me is constituted by my thoughts, my feelings, my desires, etc. Okay, so
another person also, he is having equally having the same thoughts and same kind of readings also.
Well, that's another I. I mean, it may be just a coincidence. That's another I with another me.
It's just a coincidence.
I think so. I mean, unless there is something mysterious going on.
That means there is something mysterious. Okay.
Could be. I don't know.
Yes, you were telling something. Please.
Yeah. I'm saying that's a very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Can we get a copy of that, your presentation?
Right here and everywhere. It's there. So no problem. Yes.
Okay. And another thing is that nice story you just said. Where can we find that? Like, is there in the internet anywhere?
Yes.
So
I just got it. I downloaded this from the internet.
Okay.
All you have to do is
Put the
Google search Borges and I.
Okay, so that's the title. Okay.
Yeah, just one page.
Okay.
And you will get many more information about this author.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes. Please. Mike, here, please.
Sir, if I and me belong to two different planes or two different domains completely, then how do they interact? Actually, what is the common, what is that which is common between them that provokes one to love, to get into love of another, actually? And how do they interact? Thank you.
This is excellent. I desire this sort of question.
Yes.
Because it's a question about interaction. And you also said, is there something common between the two that facilitates the interaction? That shows that we need some commonality for any interaction to be facilitated. Now, well, I'm not sure if it is a two-way interaction. I mean, whether it is an interaction or just an action. I can look at me. I don't think the me can look at I. Okay? Nothing can look at the I. I is invincible. That's why it's called the transcendental self. You know, if you go into a bit of metaphysics or even introductory philosophy, there is this idea of the transcendental self, especially in Western philosophy, from especially the German idealists. What is the meaning of transcendental? That means the I transcends anything else. The moment the I operates with its power of consciousness, things are generated, they constitute the me, so the I is looking at the me. I don't think the me can ever look back. The me doesn't have the power. Okay? If you think that the me is looking at the I, that means the I is observing the me, and you are finding an I within that me, which you think the me is looking at I.
Whether you are dividing me and I on the principle of Shankho philosophy or so, because in that case, me is a real thing, and I is also real, but me is not conscious. That's why it can't look at I, whereas I is conscious. That's why it can look at me. If that is your stance, sir?
Well, for one thing, you refer to Sankhya.
Yes.
As I already said, my ideas are not based on any history.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so I'm trying to be a minimalist without depending on any. But the other point is that point was repeat that.
Me is also real, and I is also real. That is, matter is also real. Object is also real, and subject is also real.
Yes.
But object cannot be aware of
The subject. Yes.
Whereas subject can be aware of because of consciousness.
Well, by definition,
Yes, by definition.
to be a subject is to be a subject of some object.
Yes.
By definition, it's almost mathematical. Okay, and to be an object is to be at the receiving end, to be an object in relation to some subject. Okay, the object is by definition viewed. The subject is the viewer. Therefore, the operation of consciousness between the subject and the object is an asymmetrical operation. That's the point I'm making. I don't know.
Any question? Yes, please. That side. Please pass on the mic.
From this desire for distinction, can it be concluded that humans wish to know more so badly that even if more information does not exist, they try to fill in that space with data, which is just replicating the same information across new objects? Like as you mentioned, the I and me are practically the same thing. But in order to understand the distinction, the distinct relation between subject and object, whatever existing information is there is being replicated over to a new identity. So, do humans wish to know more so badly that they'll replicate existing information?
Again, I'm not clear what you really mean by replicating more and more information. All that's happening is that, look, it is very simple. There are moments, even minimally, moments of being self-critical. We all talk about this being objective, self-critical. And that's the split between the I and the me. You are being critical of the me. Okay? And most of the time, when you said that practically they are the same, well, yes, practically we are. I mean, the I and the me are the same, just because most of the time we are not self-critical. So that gap, that hiatus is not created. Once it is created, and you would like to engage in that, in the hiatus, in the gap, then of course the reality of the I and the reality of the me, they become totally distinct realities. So much so that there could be serious alienation. Okay? Serious alienation in the sense of saying, look, I absolutely don't like me, which is very serious, of course. But that's the point. I mean, could it be a state in which the alienation becomes zero? Well, the alienation could become zero in two ways. One way is that you love the me so much that the gap is no longer there. And the alienation could become zero in another way, in which you become such that nothing matters to you as being the possessor or appropriator of properties. Okay? And I think that's what religion or spirituality is after. To make the I so independent of the me that there is full liberation or full freedom.
So the last question what you have told, that he is unaware, the letter that Borges has written, that he is confused that the letter is I is writing or me is writing.
Okay.
So in this confusion, how will you define that consciousness? Who is conscious? I is conscious or me is conscious?
Well, the confusion.
Because if there is a doubt or a doubt is there, then as a human being I don't understand then what is the meaning of consciousness then? Means I is conscious or me is conscious? Which one is conscious then? Because I am having a doubt only. Who is writing the letter?
Right.
If he is a person then.
Again, very, very good question. Well, it's the confusion is not about who is conscious, but what is the source of this consciousness? I mean, if me is the source of this consciousness, then me is the writer of these sentences.
So then how will Borges will how Borges will know who is there, who is writing?
That's the whole point. I mean, he is not sure. He might have thought that he was sure until now, but at last his skepticism becomes prominent. Self-scrutiny becomes more prominent at the end. He's scrutinizing himself even more and then beginning to doubt whether the independent I managed to write these, or it was the dependent me which sort of was a surreptitious independent I who wrote in a clandestine way. So that confusion, I think, only in literature you can find this kind of complex representation of human psyche.
That means he is uncertain.
Yes, of course.
If that is uncertain, then how is defining consciousness? That I is conscious.
He is not defining consciousness. He is, in his literary fictional way, he is trying to recognize the hiatus, the gap between the I and the me. Okay? And experimentally trying to see how much independence is there between the two. Finally, he comes to a position where he says that I can't determine whether I have attained enough independence or I'm still pretty dependent. And that, I think, is very human. Okay? I mean, he is representing the human condition. He is not writing something, let's say, in which you will have a clear philosophical verdict on what consciousness is.
So how we will overcome from this? That this duality. This is the duality because I am only confused. I am between I and me.
If I could tell that, today I didn't come here. I would be somewhere else. That I don't know about collective consciousness.
Okay, if we just kind of create an analogy between a moving picture and our life. Okay, it's like in a moving picture we have got kind of frames per second. It's like 24 frames per second or 25 frames per second create an illusion of a moving picture. But it's actually the picture is not moving. It's just moment of the stillness which is creating an illusion. In our mind, it's probably if you're talking about literature, even it has been addressed in neuroscience as well. Sam Harris, and if you even go back in the 17th century, I think probably Immanuel Kant has also kind of raised this issue. Like, if we are a kind of summations of the moments which has been created by illusion of probably time and space. Okay, so I or me, whatever you might want to call, is basically a movie which is still going on. It is. So where is the I and where is the me is this entire movie? It is still unfolding. It's a series of moments which just keeps on unfolding. And it's just an illusion of this I and me which is happening. And so who is observing and who is watching this movie? And I'm just part of this movie. So that is my question.
Yes, the temporal flow which life is, like a movie or whatever you say, the stream of consciousness is the temporal flow, and your life is, in space-time, your life is really the constitution of those moments, okay, which gives an identity to your being the person that you are. And there is a sense of owning that personhood. I am that person, okay? That appropriation, that owning is the me self. And your question about who is observing this movement, movie-like movement of life, well, the I, of course, even in the best in our classical tradition, if you become a little textual, that I becomes the witness consciousness. Okay. Now, to attain total independence from the me, the I would have to become, even in its creativity, it would have to assume the role of something like a witness consciousness, so that it never gets the feeling or the urge to be the owner of the person that is constituted of all those moments in that stream, in that flow of life. Okay. So that's how I would try to answer your question. Yeah.
So a highly interactive session, I must say. Probably one of the most interactive, and everybody participated, almost everybody participated in this. I have a just last question. With that, I want to conclude this. And this is a little different from me and I. Professor Borua just said about this Argentinian literary figure, George Luis Borges, and this confusion about I and me. I would just like to ask Professor Borua whether the magic reality that the Latin American literature is concerned about, probably the best example is of Marquez, whether that has got anything in general connection with what the philosophy that Borges has given in his literature.
No, not really. I mean, magic realism would be all about the me, the kaleidoscopic picture of the me, because after all, most of literature is about the me. It's only a Borges who would talk about this distinction. I haven't come across this sort of a metaphysical distinction in literary fiction as he attempted. So that's my answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So this is kindly give a big applause to Professor Borua for enlightening us and taking us through a very beautiful session. And all the participants who took part in this interactive session. Now, I would invite K. Basudeva Rao, who has done his BTech from Computer Science from Andhra University, Visakhapatnam. Then later he obtained his MTech in Computer Science from IIT Kanpur. After a brief tenure of working as a software professional, he decided to contribute significantly to science-spirituality interface under the able leadership and vision of Dr. T.D. Singh, whom we are again remembering today. Presently, Mr. Rao is serving as the president of Bhakti Vedanta Institute, Kolkata, as we have seen in the morning also, and actively promotes discussions on science and spirituality. He is also a Global Council trustee of the United Religions Initiative. So, kindly listen to him.
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. Good evening. Hello. So it is very amazing day today. The kind of energy that is flowing in this room is amazing, amazing. Thank you very much for your presence, and to Professor Barua for exceptional analytical presentation of I and me. Thank you, sir. So this talk will be light and is meant to give introduction and to the topic Vedanta, and give some introduction to consciousness. This conception is close to the tradition which I follow, that is Vaishnava Vedantic tradition, to be particular Bengal Vaishnava tradition. So you will find within the Indian Vedantic tradition other views, but please try to grasp whatever I understood and present to you in this particular tradition. So I start with a brief introduction to Vedanta, what I mean by Vedanta. In Indian tradition, we have epistemology where we are aware of the process of acquiring knowledge. One is pratyaksha, another is anumana, inference, and the third is shabda, revelation. Direct perception we all perceive through our senses mainly. Okay. And the direct perception has certain limits. They are listed. One is Brahma, that is illusion. Sometimes we are illusion. Pramada, we commit mistakes sometimes. Karnapatva, we have limited perception. Perception, we don't have complete perception. Our ability to perceive is limited to certain spectrum. And Vipralipsa, we have sometimes propensity to misrepresent the facts. So illusion is easy for us. Mirage, for example, sometimes on summer, we also see it on the roads, in the modern roads. And mistakes, we make mistakes. That's why sometimes we don't get the results in the lab when we do the experiments. So as a humans, we are prone to commit mistakes. And Karnapatava, our senses, whatever we perceive, that is also limited to certain spectrum. For example, our eyes can perceive only certain spectrum of light, and ears can hear only a certain spectrum of certain frequency of audio signals. And beyond that, even if the signals exist, we don't see. So this is also true for the instruments which we use, extended instruments. And further we can extend this to that it is, this conception is given by Professor Charles Townes, that we may not be completely confident at the moment, we are not completely confident about the totality of the forces. That means whatever fundamental forces we know in this universe, we cannot be completely sure that there doesn't exist more forces which we have not yet discovered. Just like infrared rays within the visible spectrum, in the electromagnetic spectrum, when we didn't discover infrared rays, they still exist. Similarly, there could be a completely different force in the universe itself that may exist, but because at the moment we have no complete information about the universe, and we have no access also, we are not able to completely explain the laws of the universe. And to go further, quantum physics further tells us that even in the known forces like electromagnetic spectrum, our ability to determine the precision to which we can perceive has a theoretical limitation through the uncertainty principle. It is not that if we have better instruments we will be able to perceive in the future. So therefore, things that lie beyond our direct perception, we try to derive knowledge through inference based on our past experience. For example, we derive knowledge about fire. Whenever we see fire, there is a smoke. So when we see smoke, next time we suspect that there could be fire. And this is another way of getting knowledge. So we conclude that there must be fire. Since inference is based also on the direct perception, this is also limited. And cloud chamber is one of the examples how we use inference in our science. And inference also is you can say is a logic. Logic is also limited, it has limitations, especially when the sentence, when there is a self-reference, the logic sometimes appear to break down. In fact, in logic and in the sciences, whenever there is a self-reference, it appears to be breaking down. And the consciousness, if you bring in the consciousness actually is the only reality where self-reference without being breaking down is reasonably maintained and comprehended. For example, when I say I am a liar, we sometimes use this word, I am a liar. In the conscious understanding of you and me, we both understand what the sentence means. But when we try to put it on a paper, I am a liar, and try to analyze it mechanistically, logically, purely mathematical logic way, it goes into difficulties. So therefore Max Planck has said that the fundamental and indispensable postulates of every genuinely productive science are not based on pure logic but rather on the metaphysical hypothesis, which no rules of logic can refute. There exists an outer world which is entirely independent of ourselves. It is only through the immediate dictate of the consciousness that we know that this world exists. So therefore, in Vedic tradition, there is another way of receiving knowledge, that is Shabda, means revelation. Things beyond our experience, we can know by revelation. If I don't have direct experience before, so I cannot use the inference also. So I have to depend on somebody. For example, if I land in Calcutta and I want to go to Rabindra Tirth venue, I have to ask somebody. I have to know the route to go to Rabindra Tirth by listening to somebody. So in revelation, there is a possibility that may be wrong, or I may be misled. Somebody may take me to another place saying that this is a route to go to Rabindra Tirth and I may land up in somewhere else. But the fact is that I have no option. I'm a new person in this Calcutta, and I have no way to go to Rabindra Tirth without asking somebody. So therefore Vedanta says that in trying to know things beyond our sense perception, beyond our senses, we must depend on revelation. Sometimes we get cheated also sometimes, it's possible. But we have no other way. If you are interested to know those things beyond our sense perception, we have to depend on the revelation. But we can check it out whether it is correct or not. For example, who is the father of Mr. A? So the very simple answer is ask Mother A. If you don't want to follow the revelation process, then you can try the process of DNA test to know who is the father. Many try to test all the people, which is very impractical. We may not be able to come up with any answer during our lifetime. So revelation also reduces our domain of search, where we want to know the truth. So you accept revelation and then do the test, verify, empirical study. First accept the revelation and then do the empirical study. So this is the process which sages follow in Vedantic tradition. So if you combine revelation, direct perception and inference all together, then you will have the best complete knowledge of consciousness or God or soul, are things that we don't have immediate access to. So therefore Vedanta is Vedanta says that scripture are the mother to understand oneself and God. You learn the knowledge from the scriptures and then you apply inference, logic, and then direct perception by experimenting yourself. So the word Vedanta means the conclusion of Vedic knowledge. The conclusion of Vedic knowledge. As all of us know, Vyasadeva has compiled the Vedas and he compiled the Vedas. He divided the Vedas into 4 groups and he delegated different sages to propagate them. And then he has also put the historical facts in the form of Puranas. Then finally he felt that I have given a lot of literature, I should summarize everything in very, very small formula so that nothing is essence, the cream is not missed. So he wrote Vedanta Sutra, which is in the form of small formulas which you can by heart, like a plus b whole square equal to a square plus b square plus 2ab. Like that we can easily remember the entire Vedic knowledge, in the essence of Vedic knowledge in the form of these quotes. So therefore this Vedanta Sutra is very, very important text in the Indian Vedic tradition, and many acharyas, great acharyas have written commentaries on that. We have Shankaracharya has written Brahma Sutra, and then we have Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, all of them have written, and many others we have written commentary on this. But the Vaishnava tradition, they accept Srimad Bhagavatam. There is a text called Srimad Bhagavatam as the natural commentary of the Vedanta by the author himself. This is given in the Garuda Purana, that Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary, that the meaning of Vedanta Sutra is present in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is given Arthoyam Brahma Sutranam, Gayatri Bhashya Ruposo. So therefore the followers of Vaishnava tradition, especially in Bengal Vaishnavism, they accept Srimad Bhagavatam as the natural commentary by the author himself. And Srimad Bhagavatam conclusions are also same as the conclusions of Bhagavad Gita. So therefore whatever I am going to present will be in line with the Bhagavad Gita and confirmed by Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is whatever I am speaking, whatever we learned from Dr. T.D. Singh and many other saints and professors, but mainly from Dr. T.D. Singh. So Erwin Schrödinger has remarked that our science, Greek science, is based on objectification. But I do believe that this is precisely the point where our present way of thinking does need to be amended, perhaps by blood transfusion from Eastern thought. The objective reality means that reality which should to exist independent of the observer. And we have been thinking in the beginning days of science that the reality is solely objective. So it does not depend on the subject, anybody can verify, the result will be the same. But with the advent of quantum physics, the subject is also coming into the picture, and we have different interpretations, but the subject is around the corner. In many of the interpretations, it is coming up. So in Vedic tradition, in Vedantic tradition, the reality is categorized into two categories. One is material energy. Fundamentally, ontologically, the reality is divided into two categories. One is material energy and another is the spiritual energy. If you go to Bhagavad Gita, this is directly from Bhagavad Gita. Bhumi rapanalo vayu khammano buddhi revacha ahankarati yamme binna prakriti rashtadha. These basic material elements, they are basically, actually if you go through Srimad Bhagavatam, there is very, very detailed description of how these elements are created, how in the beginning there is a single energy, material energy, and how that comes into manifest itself into different fundamental elements, material elements of the nature, is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto. If those who are interested can refer to that book. But these elements are basically coming from the single material energy that is called pradhan in the beginning, by the agitation of the supreme consciousness. So that is the material part. And then Krishna says, apareyam itasva anyam prakritim vidhim ne param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedham dharyati jagat. Then Krishna also says that, my dear Arjuna, apart from this, besides this, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material nature, inferior nature, material inferior nature. So Krishna is very clearly distinguishing here between the material energy and the spiritual energy. And the spiritual energy is consisting of the living entities or the conscious beings, conscious entities, which are ourselves. And the basic difference between the both material energy and spiritual energy is the consciousness. Consciousness is the property that distinguishes material energy and spiritual energy. So if it is so, what are the properties of the spirit? We are studying matter in our laboratories very much, we have a lot of information. So I present here some of the properties from the Vedantic tradition. So if you read Bhagavad Gita, one of the, Krishna gives in 2nd chapter about the properties of this fundamental particle of spiritual energy. We can call this as a quantum of spiritual energy. Because the way Krishna describes, this spiritual quantum is a real quantum. Because he says, you cannot cut it, you cannot change it, means you cannot join it. So he gives many properties of the spirit in the 2nd chapter, Lord Krishna gives. So one of the properties Krishna gives is that immeasurable. This consciousness is immeasurable, you cannot measure it. So I have been wondering what is the meaning of this, what is the meaning of this. So then I came to some understanding that if something is fundamentally different, you cannot measure it with other fundamental aspect in this reality. For example, if I want to measure magnetic property, electromagnetic property, I need to use an instrument which is sensitive to electromagnetism or which has the properties of electromagnetism. Then I can measure the properties of electromagnetism like current or voltage or other magnetic fields I can measure. But if I take a tape, if I take a tape to measure, which measures the length, I cannot measure electromagnetic property because both are fundamentally different. So the conscious the life particle or the conscious particle being fundamentally different, nothing of the material elements or material instruments will not be able to measure it, because this is also never created. But the only difference is that the spiritual quantum or the spiritual spark, it does not undergo transformation like material energy. Material energy undergoes transformation from one form of energy to another form of energy. But the spiritual quantum of energy does not undergo transformation into another kind of energy. But it can improve its qualities. So therefore, the conscious, ourselves, we can define it as eternal quantum of spiritual energy. We are eternal quantum of spiritual energy. Means we cannot combine two quantums, nor we can divide. For example, in an atom, if you give a packet of energy to an electron, it can jump to an orbit, and then you give one more packet, it goes to another orbit. Then it can directly jump to the initial orbit, giving the one single packet of the combination of both. So those kind of combining and dividing of the energy in the material realm is possible. But in spiritual realm, this quantum is fundamental, and its nature of quantum is fundamental. We cannot combine, we cannot cut. This is what Bhagavad Gita says in 2nd chapter. And then Krishna also gives that if we are different fundamentally from this world, how we are entangled in this body. So Krishna gives, apart from the 5 basic elements of matter, there are more subtle elements which actually bind the spiritual quantum to the material elements, which is our body. So Krishna gives this ego, intelligence and mind. These are the subtle material elements. These are also material elements only, part of the material energy only. If you go through the Srimad Bhagavatam, the single material energy first transforms into ego, then that transforms into intelligence, then that transforms into mind, then ether, air, water, like that sequence is there. So basically this is the same single energy which has transformed into building blocks of material world. But ego, intelligence, mind are very, very subtle, which we cannot touch, but we can feel their existence. So they are called, and technically they have given a Stula Deha and Sukshma Deha, they call it as a spirit spark, ourselves, we can call it as a spiritual body or spirit or conscious spark, conscious entity. And ego, intelligence and mind, it is called subtle body, and the body which we can touch, that is called gross body. And the model of interaction between these is given as a chariot model in the Vedic literature. The human body is like a chariot, and the passenger is the life particle. The conscious living being is like a passenger in this body. And what really controls the driver? The driver is the controlling element, controlling instrument, that is the intelligence. And mind is the reins, because mind is connected directly to the senses, physical senses. And senses are controlled to the horses. And also Vedic tradition gives us the knowledge that there are 8,400,000 different forms of material bodies, like animals and birds, beasts, different kinds of animals if you count. And they also, in Padma Purana, if you go to the exact number of the biodiversity numbers are given. And when Dr. T.D. Singh met Werner Arbour in Switzerland, Nobel laureate, he said, Dr. Singh, this number looks very interesting, because this number coming to very close to our finding. We have not yet reached those numbers, but these numbers are very interesting. So what I do here is I try to give an understanding about what this mind is, ego, intelligence and mind. What does that mean? What they do? I give you a functional understanding of these 3 elements to give you some idea, because I am also in the process of learning. Many things are not given. It needs self analysis about ourselves, our actions, our thoughts, our feelings, because whatever I have given, everything is here. We have to meditate on ourselves, like I have to meditate on me. So some of these things may be correct or may not be, but whatever I understand, they look to be reasonable. So for me, while trying to understand these elements, which came to help me in understanding these elements is the computer game which we play. The analogy, if you analyze yourselves how you play the computer game, these things are very easy to, that analogy will very much help us to understand this. In this in this diagram, spirit or the spiritual spark, it is now identifying itself with this body. Now I am thinking, I don't know spiritual spark, I have not heard before. When I am born, I have not heard that I am an Atma. No. I was thinking I am me. This is whatever I am saying, this is me. That means there is a mechanism inside in which I was made to think this body. There is a hierarchy of functions that help us to identify myself with this body. You can understand this if you analyze yourself, how you identify yourself with the character in a video game. So when you want to play a game, first thing what you do is you identify yourself with a character in the game. For example, I want to play Temple Run. I have not played, but I have seen many people playing Temple Run. If I want to play Temple Run, what I have to do, I have to identify myself with the person who is running in the video. On the screen, I have to think, now I forget that I am Vasudeva Rao. I am the person who is running on this. That means I have to forget myself and then identify with the person who is running on the wall. Or if you are playing a war game with a soldier who is playing the game. So this false ego is the element which helps us identify with something. This is a material, subtle element which helps us to identify with something else. Because this ability to identify with something is already there in ourselves. In our consciousness being, that ability is there. For example, we can extend the same to the computer game. The ability to identify is not within the game, that is in me, the person who is playing. Similarly, the conscious being who is identifying with this body has the ability to identify. But this false ego mediates that to identify with the body. So, so this is one example of video game. We identify ourselves. Then the intelligence part, it is once you identify with the character in the video game. Now the intelligence helps you. Now when you identify yourself with the temple runner, you want to get the maximum score, right? Your identification most of the times defines your goal. Your identification most of the times defines our goal. Even in our life also, that's what defines our goals. I identify myself with, suppose I identify as an Indian, my goal is immediately clear. I want to make India very great. Or if I identify myself with a resident of Calcutta, I want to make Calcutta the best. So similarly, as soon as the goal is fixed, the intelligence helps with algorithms and means to achieve that, to achieve your purpose. As soon as you have a false identification, you have a purpose which is false or which is in relation to the identification which you have gained. So the intelligence element helps to generate ideas how you can do that, how you can achieve that your goal, misidentified goal. And it also mechanizes. In the beginning sometimes you have to mediate the intelligence to learn new ideas to get, but once you do couple of times, that gets mechanized within the intelligence. So the intelligence is Functionally I can say, physically what it is exactly I cannot say. How much it is completely different element from the brain, and how much in the brain it is, there are some software in the brain. But according to Bhagavad Gita, intelligence, there is a subtle element different from the brain, but there could be a interaction between the intelligence and the brain. Or maybe brain is a computational element which all these three elements may be using, mind, ego and intelligence. Three of them may be using as a common computational device. That is also possible. And yeah, so and then mind. Mind is something like a flip-flop. If some of you are from computer science background, a flip-flop is a logical gate which constantly changes its state to 1, 0, 0, 1 like this. So mind is a continuous non-stop flip-flop of past, present and future, gross and subtle enjoyments and sufferings. The mind is so designed that once we identify ourselves with this body, the mind keeps us busy. It continuously keeps changing its states and presents before you what you want to do. Can you do this? Do you want to do that? For example, I eat a sweet. When I eat a sweet, the mind stores the experiment. The mind stores the experience of my taste, because mind is also called as the king of senses. Means all the sensual inputs go to the brain, and from brain they go to the mind. Mind is the one which first gets those sensual sense inputs, and then those sense inputs are transmitted to the conscious being, which experiences those sensual inputs. But it also records those sensual inputs. And this mind is so designed because we wanted to identify with this body. It is continuously kept to make us identify with the body. So what it does is that it brings up, oh, that day you have eaten that sweet, do you want to eat? Or that day you have gone to that movie, it is very nice, you want to go again? Or like this, it is always bringing some kind of past or future possible, our enjoyment, or whatever you want to do based on our false identification. So this mind, intelligence and ego, they actually bind the conscious particle to the body by presenting this body as an animated character to the conscious particle within this body. Just like in a video game, we were presented with an animated character which we just get on and play, but that is presented as a semi-autonomous character which we can identify ourselves and play with. So similarly, this body is also designed as a semi-automated material machine, animated machine, which we can hang on and use it. So there is certain kind of autonomous functions within mind, within ego, within intelligence, and even within the body, and only the interface points are given to the spiritual spark. Just like within the game, we don't know how a character is animated, but the interface control is given to us. So similarly, in this body, there are many autonomous functions at different levels, at mind level, at intelligence level, at ego level, even at biological level and physical level also we can see there are many autonomous functions which we don't know, just like we don't know the autonomous functions of a video game character, but we are given an interface to that character so that we can play. And generally, why do we play games? Why do we play game? For example, I want to become a pilot, I could not become a pilot, so I play a game where I am a pilot, so I satisfy my desire. And the scriptures say that our presently why we are identifying with this body, why we are here is also similar reason, that we wanted to try something different which we are not. So this facility has been given to us. But when we become bored, we again can go back to our original identity, which is I am playing before the computer. After some time I forget that I am playing. But somebody comes, my mother comes and says, hey, how long you are playing? Come on, take food. So then I realize that I have been lost. So similarly, when we get very much busy and lost, sages and seers, they come and remind us the Lord from inside sometimes arranges such incidents so that we introspect ourselves that how long we want to continue here and whether we are satisfied what we have been doing here. And if you want, we can come out of the false identification with this body. You can awaken to your original identity, who you are. So pure consciousness maybe we can define as your original pure identity, who you are, what you are thinking about yourself, who you are. You can define that way. So when your identification is pure, then your consciousness, maybe you can say you are completely pure. So these levels of identity, they keep going on. I have identified with the body, then I identify with the immediate, my family members. So my world keeps growing. So but when you understand that this is not very fun here, along the fun there is a lot of price I have to pay. So when you think, do I need to really pay all these prices for this fun? Is there a fun where it is more continuous, permanent and non so this is a brief functional introduction which I have developed in due course of trying to understand these functions. Now I give more more properties of the conscious particle. So one of the properties of the conscious, this particle is, this is the consciousness is one of the fundamental properties. So this includes awareness, knowledge, free will and responsibility. Means we are aware of something. Like I am aware of the taste of the sugar. And then knowledge, we have some fundamental knowledge. Fundamental knowledge means I have fundamental knowledge about number one, number two. So if I try to explain what is 1 or 2, it gets very difficult. Suppose if you try to define how do we define 2? So you try to define 2 in terms of something, and then the next question comes, what is that? So there is a long loop which will never ends unless the conscious particle has inherent, fundamentally knowledgeable about certain fundamental aspects of knowledge. So conscious particle has fundamental knowledge, chit, sat chit, eternity, and this is the knowledge. And free will, we always have free will. Free will means the ability to will what I want to do. Whether I will be able to do it or not, that is another next question, next level of reality. But the fact is that we are always given the facility to will what we want to do. That is a free will, and that is also one of the fundamental properties of the consciousness. If you take out the free will, then conscious particle will no longer be a conscious particle, because it has to be like a material particle completely governed by the physical laws. But here we have free will. Free will means you can desire what you want to do. Yeah, for example, a ball doesn't have a free will, how it wants to go. And responsibility. So we all have a sense of morality. So what is the source of this sense of morality? So sometimes we try to define with the help of neural activities, but can we ascribe our moral or immoral activities to the neurons? That is a question mark, because the judicial system will become irrelevant, because nobody is responsible for anything. There was misfiring. Somebody can say, I have, because in the demonetization age I need a lot of money, so I have caught hold of an ATM and then some firing has happened in my brain. So we cannot escape like that. We are held responsible for our actions. We cannot ascribe our actions to neurons. So free will, another way to understand responsibility is that when we send a robot to the space, we don't feel responsible to bring it back, but when we send a human being, we feel responsible to bring it back. That means we know inherently that there is something different in both. So Roser Penrose says that legal issue of responsibility seems to imply that there is indeed within each of us some kind of an independent self with its own responsibilities, means which cannot be reduced to the material physical laws or as an epiphenomena of matter. And Michael Poliani, he says, consciousness is a principle that fundamentally transcends not only physics and chemistry but also mechanistic principles of living beings. So, all thinking scientists agree that we all have consciousness and free will, but at present scientific knowledge cannot explain this. We need a new science, or we need to expand our scientific endeavor with spirituality as a partner, because we are reaching too many dead ends in different directions. So if we take some aspects from spirituality and try to incorporate them in scientific laws, maybe you will be able to have a meaningful description of reality which is relevant to our life, our own selves. So, and happiness is another fundamental state or desired state of the spiritual particle, because all of us wants to become happy and none of us wants to become unhappy. So the very fact that all of us wants to be happy, right? I have not found a person who wants to be unhappy. So it gives a hint that our happiness is our fundamental property, or we can say the ground state of the spiritual quantum or spiritual spark. So whenever we go to an unhappy stage, we try to come back, like electron which is excited to other state, it comes back to the. Michael Poliani says very nice, very interesting point here, that these limitations, they are not actually drawback, or they are not a curse for us, but actually they are a boon for us, because by such limitations we find something very useful for us in doing science. The recognition of certain basic impossibilities has laid foundations of some major principles of physics and chemistry. Similarly, recognition of the impossibility of understanding living things in terms of physics and chemistry, far from setting limits to our understanding of life, will guide it in the right direction. Such a demonstration would help to draw a truer image of life and man than that given by the present concept of biology. So these limitations, if we realize, then it will help us to go beyond our present limits which we have set ourselves. We can go beyond and explore, and that will give a completely different perspective and meaning to our life. And finally, the spiritual quantum has its own constitutional form, which we don't know right now. Just like we forget while playing the game that I am a person who is sitting in the table and playing, and that form we forget, and we remember the form which we identify. So similarly, at this present state of identifying with this body, our original form is not known to us. And self-realization means to awaken from this present identification to our original identification. Just like when we stop playing the game, we stop identifying with the character and realize that I am son of such and such, and my mother is now angry with me because I am taken too much time. So similarly, self-realization means to stop playing this game of whatever big. When we create computer game, they are also very attractive. But when the Lord designs a game, it is very difficult to know that this is a game. It is so real, and characters are so real. So self-realization means to awaken to our original identity. We have our identity, I have our form, we have our name, we have our address, we have our relationships with other entities, other conscious beings. But we are all playing it like a network game where we play different characters. So soul has a form also. So this is the final message. Sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick, don't lose faith. So many times we get discouraged for some small events, but if you understand the meaning and purpose of life, the big things in life which we think are big, they become very, very small. So spirituality will help us to give us a big picture where the big things in our life will become small. For example, when we are going in the bus, I give this example. If you don't get seat, we don't become depressed, because that is a small thing, because we are going on a higher purpose. If you get seat, you will sit down, otherwise we will go by standing. That doesn't, it may give temporary inconvenience, but that doesn't give us any depression or lack of enthusiasm in life or trying to end life. Similarly, if you have spirituality in life, that will give us a big picture in which our present big problems in life, obstacles, they become a small issues. We don't get discouraged by those things. In fact, we march ahead to realize our true potential in life and attain the goal of life. Thank you very much.